Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this webinar. We're going to wait a couple more minutes just to let everybody join, and then we'll get going. Right, so kicking off, everyone. So if you don't know me already, my name is Matt Elson, and thanks for joining us on this webinar about a new way to finance. We're going to go into a little bit more detail about that later on, and we're really, really lucky and privileged to be joined by Sam, who will be providing all the content for today, fortunately for me. So he's really fortunate to have him along. And I'll just go into a little bit about how this webinar has come to be and what it means to the Indigo community. So what I'd like to say first off is any questions, just whack them in the chat. And then at the end of this, we'll do a Q&A with Sam, and we can get a little bit deeper and go under the hood to find out anything else we need to. In addition to that, just to introduce this webinar and talk a little bit about why this has come to be. Indigo have been looking at this area for quite a long time in an effort to support its partners. And what we find with traditional lease agreements or traditional leasing technology is that it's quite rigid, and it doesn't necessarily work for a lot of organizations where they're trying to move quite quickly and they can't always forecast large hardware needs like way out in advance. So the reason that we were really, really keen to partner with CHG was that they have a technology that allows us to add hardware periodically on an ad hoc basis, and it just gets added to your next lease once per quarter, which makes it nice and clean and easy for our customers to manage their leasing agreement. But it also means they can update their hardware when they need to and not leave themselves vulnerable to cybersecurity risk, which Sam will talk a little bit more about as we go on. So that's the context for why we're here. There's one of these webinars every single month throughout the year of 2026. So there's different ones that you can go into on the landing page, which I'll send out in the notes after this. There'll also be a recording of this event. If you want to share that with anybody else, then you're free to do so. So first of all, thank you all for coming on, but more so thank you to Sam for joining. The last thing I just need to put a quick caveat in so everybody understands, there's no commercial agreement between Indigo and CHG. We're just trying to connect CHG to our partner base so we can educate our customers about what good leasing looks like and what good technology looks like in this part in this industry. So with that said, I'm going to hand over to Sam, who's going to guide you through a whistle stop of all the different things that they're doing differently and what they can bring to the table around the leasing sector.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Matt. I'm just resizing my desktop, so please bear with me. There we go.
It's not very often people ask me to talk for longer, Sam.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just for a second.
Well, as a general rule, people ask me to stop speaking a little bit more early rather than keep going. But yeah, thanks to everyone for coming on. What I'd say just a little bit more about that in that leasing piece, as Sam will dig into it a bit more. There's three elements to this. So there is the quarterly leasing, but there's also the sustainability element, which Sam will talk about a little bit more. And then lastly, outside of that, there's the forecasting. So we all know that forecasting multiple different hardware agreements can get really tricky, really difficult, especially for in the SMB sector where you're trying to manage your cash flow. And that's one of the other things they bring to the table is the technology to sort of control that. We are looking to partner with them, but not commercially. So that will mean that we'll be able to help in that order process for our partners. But again, like I said, there's no commercial agreement between us. So it would be a direct commercial agreement between anybody that wished to partner with CHG and their organisation, of which Indigo wouldn't be party.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt, and welcome everyone. Good morning. I guess both to all the people that are attending today, but also hi, welcome to all the people that are going to be watching this back on demand. So as Matt said, this is the first in a series of webinars hosted by various team members at CHG. Today, I'm your host. My name's Sam Thomson, and I'm going to guide you through the IT asset life cycle and show how managing it properly improves security, reduces costs, and removes any hidden risks. Quick bit about me. I've worked in the IT industry for 20 plus years, and for the last 14 years at CHG-MERIDIAN, and specializing in IT lifecycle and asset finance. So before we get into it all, it's important to recognize for everyone on this call that Indigo IT already plays a critical role in keeping your environment secure on a day-to-day basis. They're monitoring, maintaining, patching, responding to alerts, dealing with incidents, and keeping things running when most people don't even realize there's a problem. They also see patterns that individual organizations don't always see because they're working across multiple customers, multiple estates, multiple environments, and they see how security issues actually emerge in the real world, not just how they're described in vendor slides, for example. So what we're going to talk about is the life cycle of the hardware itself, how it either supports that work or how it can quietly undermine it as well. So when devices are modern, visible, refreshed at the right time, Indigo can do what they do far more effectively. Patching works as intended, security tools deployed cleanly, and policies are enforced consistently. So cybersecurity isn't necessarily a lifecycle problem. It is a lifecycle problem, not just a software one. And what I mean by that is when organizations typically think about cyber risk, you look outwards, you look to attackers, phishing campaigns, ransomware attacks, zero-day exploits, that sort of thing. Those threats are real, and MSPs spend a huge amount of time helping to protect you from exactly those things. But when you step back and look at how serious security incidents actually happen, a lot of them don't start with some sort of dramatic external event. They start with internal conditions that have been building quietly over time. So as devices get a little bit older, operating systems move closer to the end of support, firmware updates become less frequent. A laptop that was perfectly capable 3 or 4 years ago starts to struggle with newer security tooling. Not because anyone's made a bad decision, but because the technology has moved on. And at the same time, assets move around, people change roles, devices get reassigned, offices open and close, and remote working becomes normal, and gradually visibility starts to slip. None of these things trigger an alert when they happen. There's no incident ticket. Nothing breaks immediately, and that's precisely why they're dangerous. By the time the risk becomes visible, maybe through a failed audit, a security incident, or a tool that no longer deploys cleanly, the underlying causes have often been there for years, and this is what makes cybersecurity a life cycle problem. So risk doesn't just arrive overnight, it accumulates as assets age, refresh cycles drift, and control weakens incrementally across the estate. Why this is hard for small, medium businesses. The life cycle challenge exists in every organization, but it tends to hit SMBs and smaller enterprises much harder because you don't have the endless IT resource. You don't have separate teams for asset management, for security operations, finance, procurement, etc. And in many cases, it's the same people just wearing different hats at once. Refresh decisions are often delayed for rational reasons, to preserve cash, to prioritize growth initiatives, to avoid any business disruption. And individually, those decisions make total sense. The problem is that when we refresh, when it gets delayed repeatedly, risk doesn't stand still. It keeps moving forward in the background. What is seen in practice is that by the time the security tools start to struggle, or patching becomes inconsistent, certain devices fall out of policy. The organization is already reacting rather than choosing, and lifecycle management is about avoiding that position entirely. It's about giving smaller organizations a way to stay in control, not by adding layers and layers of process, but by making sure assets are visible, decisions are planned, and of course the cost is then predictable. So that's where CHG fits in alongside Indigo, not by replacing what they do on a day-to-day, but by giving them an environment that's easier to secure, easier to manage, easier to support, which ultimately reduces costs for the end customer, protects your cash flow, avoids expensive reactive decisions over time. So in terms of the procurement, cybersecurity doesn't start with patching or monitoring. It really does start with the procurement itself. In most organizations, devices are purchased by different teams, often at different times, under different time pressures, which is normal and completely understandable. Different roles need different tools. So, for example, a finance user doesn't need the same device as a developer, and a field-based employee has very different requirements and needs than someone who's desk-based. So the challenge isn't having choice; it's the uncontrolled choice. Without some structure, flexibility can turn into inconsistency. Different models, different capabilities, different support operating systems, all entering the same state at the same time. And from a management perspective, that inconsistency makes environments much harder to manage, as you'd imagine, harder to secure. It creates exceptions, edge cases, additional operational overhead, all of which will add layers and increase costs. So CHG supports their customers by bringing more of a structure to this stage through governed e-procurement, not by forcing a one-size-fits-all, but defining device options for different user personas, and ensuring that they're approved and able to be supported. So that means you still retain choice, you still retain flexibility, but you also ensure that everyday devices entering the estate can be supported. They can support modern operating systems, encryption, and endpoint security throughout its useful life. The commercial benefit is just as important. Standardized procurement reduces unit cost, it simplifies support, and it avoids hidden expense of dealing with incompatible or short-lived devices later on. Getting procurement right doesn't remove any choice. It removes unnecessary risk, operational friction, and avoidable costs before the problems ever reach Indigo, or in fact your internal teams as well. So how we do this is CHG-MERIDIAN. We have our own in-house asset management system. It's a TESMA, which is a sort of acronym for Technology and Service Management Tool. It's a web portal, and as everyone appreciates, one of the most common challenges across your environment is visibility, or the challenge is the lack of visibility. Devices that exist aren't necessarily properly tracked. Assets have moved users or location. Equipment can be refreshed that needs to be, but hasn't. From a security perspective, those blind spots become risk. And from a commercial perspective, that adds layers and becomes more expensive. So if you don't know what you own, where it is, or who's using it, you can't manage the cost effectively, and you certainly can't plan the refresh properly. So what TESMA does is it provides a single point of truth across your entire IT asset estate, across users, cost centers, locations. That means the customer can see exactly which devices are assigned to which users, which departments, which countries, and critically, what those assets are costing on a granular level. For organizations that operate across multiple regions, this becomes even more important, as you can imagine. CHG supports our customers globally. We're in 36 countries with consistent reporting and governance across the globe. So whether an asset's in Europe, UK, APAC, the Americas, it's managed under the same framework. And this enables practical cross-charging across by cost center or country, meaning from an internal audit or an internal accounting, you have far better financial control. And that makes it easier to secure and support. From a customer's point of view, it removes waste, highlights underutilized assets, and it also avoids paying for any equipment that no longer is delivering any value. So TESMA's not just an asset register, it's more of a governance and cost control tool that underpins both security and cash management on a global scale if required. As Matt said at the beginning, we are doing, or Indigo IT are hosting a series of events, of which CHG is a part of some. And if you put the date in your diary, April the 30th, we're going to take a deep dive into TESMA, the asset management system, with our TESMA team leader, Noah. And again, those details will be sent out after the call. So if we look at the in-life use, devices don't become a problem overnight. As I said earlier, they drift into becoming one. So operating systems, the support ends, firmware updates, they slow or stop completely. Security tools evolve faster than the hardware can keep up. And at the same time, performance degrades, devices become slower, batteries degrade, and reliability completely drops. This shows up as incremental noise, essentially, more tickets, more exceptions, more time spent keeping aging equipment from working properly. From your perspective, from the customer's perspective, it shows up as hidden cost, difficult, intangible costs such as loss of productivity, increased support, and often a growing security gap, which means which isn't always immediately obvious. And what TESMA does is it allows both Indigo and the customers to see this drift happening in real time. You're seeing the assets age, you're seeing the support status, the lease positions, you're aware of any refresh timings. So instead of reacting when a device becomes unusable or insecure, organizations can plan interventions whilst there are still options, while costs are still very controllable. So this is why this is where lifecycle management starts to deliver real financial benefits. Planned refresh is almost always cheaper than emergency replacement. Predictable spend is always easier to manage than a reactive cost. And by keeping your devices within their secure, productive window, you can operate more efficiently and avoid the compounded cost of aging technology and unplanned change. So what is the cost versus the cyber risk? So this slide brings together a lot of what we talked about so far. It shows why cost and cyber risk so often rise together, even when organizations are trying to save money. Hardware values decline steadily, which is expected. Assets depreciate. Cyber risk doesn't behave like that. It actually doesn't decline slowly or linearly. It accelerates. So around 3 to 4 years, several things tend to happen all at once. Devices fall out of warranty, firmware support reduces or ends. Newer security tools expect capabilities that are older than the hardware simply doesn't have. And this is the point where the environment starts to become harder to manage, patching less consistent, you get exceptions increasing, security tooling behaves differently depending on the device. And from a customer's perspective, this is where costs start to rise in a less obvious way. but it's more support effort, it's more user downtime, more reactive spend. So ironically, traditional ownership or full payout model often mean organizations are paying the most during this exact period, but when devices are least secure and least productive, what looks like a sensible cost-saving decision, keeping devices longer, sweating assets, can quietly push organizations into the most expensive and riskier part of the life cycle. So the key point here is that unmanaged assets, that unmanaged aging doesn't increase cyber risk, it increases total cost, often without anyone consciously choosing to spend more. Now, CHG, we specialize in residual value leasing. So this is where the life cycle starts to deliver very tangible financial benefits. Residual value-based leasing recognizes a simple truth. Devices still have value at the end of their secure, productive life. So instead of paying for the full cost of an asset over an extended period, RV or residual value-based models factor that residual in upfront, which means immediate lower monthly costs. The practical impact is important. So lower monthly payments make it affordable to refresh devices at the right time, before security risks spike, before support costs escalate. And for customers, that means cash flow is protected, no sudden capital shock, spend becomes more predictable and aligned to actual use, and that provides consistency of approach, predictable cost models, the ability to govern assets centrally, even when their workforce and locations are spread geographically or internationally. So in simple terms, an RV-based lease turns a refresh from a difficult financial decision into a planned operational one, reducing risk, smoothing cash flow, and avoiding the cost of emergency change later on. So with regards to the end of life and bringing everything together, cybersecurity isn't just about protecting what you have today. It's more about controlling what you'll still be running tomorrow and how much it's going to cost you along the way throughout its life cycle. So Indigo play a critical role in keeping your environment secure day to day. They're doing things like monitoring, patching, responding to threats, dealing with the reality of a live production environment. Not theory, not vendor slides, but what actually happens in practice. We've talked about today how the life cycle of the underlying assets either support that work or can quietly undermine it too. So when procurement is structured but flexible, devices entering the estate are fit for purpose and fit for security. When assets are visible through TESMA, customers know exactly what they own, where it is, who's using it, what it's costing, again, across users, across cost centers, even countries. When refreshes are planned using residual value-based leasing, security decisions stop being delayed by cost conversations, cash flows protected, spend becomes predictable, environments stay modern rather than drifting into risk. And when the end of life is managed properly, data disks are removed, value is recovered, and sustainability goals are met through genuine circular economy and carbon zero, not just as an afterthought, but built into the life cycle from day one. The result of all of this is not complexity, it's the opposite. It's an environment that's easier to secure, it's easier to manage, easier to support, and ultimately more cost effective and more predictable for you to run over time. So not by forcing a one size fits all model, not by adding layers of process, but by treating cybersecurity as what it really is, a life cycle problem that just needs a joined up practical approach. If there's one message to take away today, it's really that the cheapest device isn't the one that you keep the longest. It's the one that you refresh at the right time. And again, you can see on there talking about sustainability. Well, I'm not going to go into a deep dive. We do have another webinar scheduled for later on in the year, where we can have our global group sustainability lead, Allard, will be going into a deep dive into sustainability and the whole circular economy of CHG and how we approach it. So I'd like to invite you to that one too. Right, so to bring everything together, as I said, cybersecurity isn't just about protecting what you have today, it's about what you'll be running tomorrow and how much it's going to cost you along the way. So that's how Indigo and CHG work together, delivering operational security excellence, and CHG providing the lifecycle, commercial and governance framework that makes it sustainable but at scale. So a big thank you to everyone who's attended today, those who are watching it back online. I hope you found it informative. As previously mentioned, this is the first in the series of some webinars, so put these ones in your diary too. Please feel free to scan the QR code on the screen. That will connect you with me on LinkedIn, and feel free to contact me directly if you've got any questions. Thank you once again, and now I'd like to open the floor to Q&A. So back over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, that was brilliant. And I think, you know, especially as IT guys, we're very guilty of always looking at the software and not a lot of the times looking at the hardware. So we're always looking at the software tools. How can we defend against this? How can we defend against this? And I think that, like you said, that joined up approach of just considering the right things at the right time, it is really important. And that's something that we need to manage those risk registers with our customers. So yeah, thanks for that. And it was really insightful. I know that there's a lot more detail behind those areas as well, and in those further webinars they're going to go, especially into the sustainability one, like a lot further down into what happens there. Could you just for me and for everyone else on the call, just talk a little bit more about, you said about the data wiping of the devices and what that looks like at the end of the lease? You know, how do we just protect the users from any data, you know, accidentally getting out into the world?
Indeed, yes. So let me stop sharing my screen for a moment. So what I would, before I go into detail about that, what I would caveat is that with CHG, we try and make a solution that's totally bespoke from customer to customer. So when it comes to end of life services and data erasure, data destruction, all of that kind of thing, it's never really a one size fits all. There are multiple flavors of data destruction. We have frameworks in place with government organizations, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Defence. So as you can imagine, with those entities, that's an extreme end of the spectrum, whereby they may need the hard drives pulled out of the devices, degaussed, shredded, and then in some instances thermally destructed. So they literally burn all of the parts in a furnace at 2,000 degrees. So that's what we don't like doing, because that obviously contributes to waste, whereas we're all very much about circular economy. But what we do on the normal day-to-day, what we look to do is, again, different levels. Typically, we'll go in to the customer when it comes working with the customer on the refresh in whatever it may be, 2, 3, 4, 5 years time, and we will look to come in and collect those assets, take them away, and we give them an audit. We use software called Blanco, which is globally recognized. It adheres to all of the ISO and is fully compliant with cybersecurity. We wipe the hard drives, and then we give the customer a certificate saying that these devices have been wiped, or they haven't in some circumstances, and then in those circumstances the devices are removed and then treated differently. More often than not, the devices will be wiped. And again, there's different flavors, different levels of security. Some customers require that cages be locked on their site and then only opened at the other end. They have 2 drivers, so the transport's always in motion. It's never a one size fits all. It's really understanding what the security needs are from the customer, and providing a solution that is tailored to those needs.
Great. And then just to carry on down that route very quickly, so most of our customers don't have that sort of like data need, so for that level of destruction. So
Of
as long as we
course,
had the
of course.
certification
Yeah.
that the data had been destroyed, we'd be fine. And like you said, that would line up with all the accreditation that we all use. So that would be great. And then those assets, they carry on existing in the world then, and they go out and carry on living a life, and they don't just get thrown on a
Absolutely
scrap.
not. No, and this is what we've been doing since 1979. It's repurposing. It's giving all of these devices a second and third life. So yeah, the whole circular economy is what we live and breathe. Typically, what happens to the devices? Let's say a laptop. More often than not, the industry standard is a 3-year life cycle, and we take that device back. We physically clean it. We data wipe it, and then they're sold in batches to brokers who typically supply local government and education in all across Europe now. I know it's happening more and more in the UK, but within France, for example, you have to have 20% of your state has to be refurb devices. So there's becoming more and more of a demand for the secondhand devices. But yeah, absolutely. 96% of our devices are given a second life. And put it into perspective, last year at our technology centres, we remarketed over 1 million IT assets.
Oh, brilliant. That's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on today, Sam. I can't see any direct other additional questions on the call, but obviously if anybody wants to contact Sam directly or do it through us, we'll put you in touch, and we'll make sure that you can carry on that conversation if you need to. As I said, Indigo wouldn't be party to that conversation anyway. It would be a direct conversation between yourself or Sam or one of his colleagues. You'll probably put in touch with the right person. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Giving us that. Yeah, brilliant. And yeah, we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.